Peace, beautiful people. How are you today? Welcome back to Ascension Books and Conversations. Happy Sunday. Happy September. We're in a new month. I can't believe it already. But if this is your first time, welcome to our weekly book study, book reading. And if you're joining us again, thank you for being here as always. So today we have a little bit more time. And so we're going to go through the next section together, and I'm just going to jump right in, be respectful of your time as well. We're getting into section 5 of the book, the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ. Also, yes, if this is your first time, this weekly book reading, we are reading one book right now, and it's called the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ. And if you want to learn more about the book itself, I suggest you go back into the introduction video. I leave all of the videos in the description box below for you, as well as the reading, so that you can pull it up for yourself and read along if you so will. And also for you to have easy access to go back and listen to the other chapters and any revelations that came from those chapters on that day. So I'm going to do my best to, it's actually interesting. I was at a family reunion yesterday, and while we were there, two of the older men were discussing the Bible, and apparently that's something they do often, and talking about Revelation. And I heard one of them saying that anybody that adds to the Bible, I forgot what the verse was, but something about adding on to the Bible or taking away from, it's pretty much wrong to do so. And that kind of stuck with me for a little bit because the other man was arguing that, who wrote the Bible? And they were saying God. And it just made me think that, a lot of what we learn in churches and things like that has been added on. And I know that the intention of these things are for us to better understand what's being written. But at the end of the day, a lot of what we learn has been added on by others rather than just reading straight what was in the story. So my goal today is to just read what is in the book and allow you to have the space to have those revelations for yourself without me adding on to it too much. I definitely still want this to be a conversation, a discussion, but also I don't want to put my own perspectives in something, especially that's so new. I'm just going to do my best to read through these next few chapters. We're getting into section 5, and it's the childhood and early education of Jesus. So last week we read the chapters that were involved in the childhood and early education of John the Baptist, or John the Harbinger. And so we're now getting into, they are not in the same space physically at this time. So we're getting into now Mary and Joseph and Jesus during his childhood. So we're starting at chapter 16, if you want to pull it up, or just listen. I will be reading it regardless. And the summary for this chapter is the home of Joseph. Mary teaches her son. Jesus' grandparents give a feast in his honor. Jesus has a dream, his grandmother's interpretation, his birthday gift. The home of Joseph was on Marmion Way in Nazareth. Here, Mary taught her son the lessons of Elihu and Salome, something you can go back to. And Jesus greatly loved the Vedic hymns and the Avesta. But more than all, he loved to read the Psalms of David and the pungent words of Solomon. The Jewish books of prophecy were his delight, and when he reached his 7th year, he needed not the books to read, for he had fixed in memory every word. Joachim and his wife, grandparents of child Jesus, made a feast in honor of the child, and all their near of kin were guests. And Jesus stood before the guests and said, I had a dream. And in my dream I stood before a sea upon a sandy beach. The waves upon the sea were high. A storm was raging on the deep. Someone gave me a wand. I took the wand and touched the sand, and every grain of sand became a living thing. The beach was all a mass of beauty and of song. I touched the waters at my feet, and they were changed to trees and flowers and singing birds, and everything was praising God. And someone spoke. I did not see the one who spoke. I heard the voice which said, There is no death. Grandmother Anna loved the child. She laid her hand on Jesus' head and said, I saw you stand beside the sea. I saw you touch the sand and waves. I saw them turn to living things, and then I knew the meaning of the dream. The sea of life rolls high. The storms are great. The multitude of men are idle, listless, waiting like dead sand upon the sea, upon the beach. Your wand is truth. With this, you touch the multitudes, and every man becomes a messenger of holy light and life. You touch the waves upon the sea of life. Their turmoils cease. The very winds become a song of praise. There is no death, because the wand of truth can change the driest bones to living things, and bring the loveliest flowers from stagnant ponds, and turn the most discordant notes to harmony and praise. Joachim said, My son, today you pass the 7th milestone of your way of life, for you are 7 years of age, and we will give to you as a remembrance of this day whatever you desire. Choose that which will afford you most delight. And Jesus said, I do not want a gift, for I am satisfied. If I could make a multitude of children glad upon this day, I would be greatly pleased. Now, there are many hungry boys and girls in Nazareth who would be pleased to eat with us this feast and share with us the pleasures of this day. The richest gift that you can give to me is your permission to go out and find these needy ones and bring them here that they may feast with us. Joachim said, 'Tis well. Go out and find the needy boys and girls and bring them here. We will prepare enough for all. And Jesus did not wait. He ran. He entered every dingy hut and cabin of the town. He did not waste his words. He told his mission everywhere. And in a little time, 103 score of happy, ragged boys and girls were following him up Marmion Way. The guests made way. The banquet hall was filled with Jesus' guests, and Jesus and his mother helped to serve. And there was food enough for all, and all were glad. And so the birthday gift of Jesus was a crown of righteousness. Chapter 17. The only thing I want to say that I got from that real fast is that sometimes in Christianity, a lot of people like to emphasize that during Jesus' ministry, when he was 33, he lived a poor life, which I don't necessarily agree with. I think he emphasized not idolizing richness so much, but even here, like, he was not poor. He helped the poor, and he helped by giving whatever he had and made sure that there was enough for everybody that was in need. So I just wanted to point that out real fast because, yeah, sometimes people like to envision him as just poor and only a carpenter, but he was just very giving with what he was given. So that's a beautiful lesson I definitely took from that. All right, we're going to move on to chapter 17. Jesus talks with the rabbi of the synagogue of Nazareth. He criticizes the narrowness of Jewish thought. Now, Rabbi Barakiah of the synagogue of Nazareth was aide to Mary in the teaching of her son. One morning, after service in the synagogue, the rabbi said to Jesus as he sat in silent thought, "Which is the greatest of the 10 commands?" And Jesus said, "I do not see a greatest of the 10 commands. I see a golden cord that runs through all the 10 commands, that binds them fast and makes them one. This cord is love, and it belongs to every word of all the 10 commands. If one is full of love, he can do nothing else than worship God, for God is love. If one is full of love, he cannot kill. He cannot falsely testify. He cannot covet, can do not but honor God and man. If one is full of love, he does not need commands of any kind. And Rabbi Barakia said, your words are seasoned with the salt of wisdom that is from above. Who is the teacher who has opened up this truth to you? And Jesus said, I do not know that any teacher opened up this truth for me. It seems to me that truth was never shut, that it was always opened up, for truth is one and it is everywhere. And if we open up the windows of our minds, the truth will enter in and make herself at home. For truth can find her way through any crevice, any window, any open door. The rabbi said, what hand is strong enough to open up the windows and doors of mind so truth can enter in? And Jesus said, it seems to me that love, the golden cord that binds the 10 commands in one, is strong enough to open any human door so that the truth can enter in and cause the heart to understand. Now, in the evening, Jesus and his mother sat alone, and Jesus said, the rabbi seems to think that God is partial in his treatment of the sons of men, that Jews are favored and are blessed above all other men. I do not see how God can have his favorites and be just. Are not Samaritans and Greeks and Romans just as much the children of the Holy One as are the Jews? I think the Jews have built a wall about themselves, and they see nothing on the other side of it. They do not know that flowers are blooming over there, that sowing times and reaping times belong to anybody but the Jews. It surely would be well if we would break these barriers down so that the Jews might see that God has other children that are just as greatly blessed. I want to go from Jewry land and meet my kin in other countries of my fatherland. Chapter 17. Dang, Jesus. At 17 was already seeing that at that time, because in the New Testament, we see Jesus getting mad at the Pharisees, and those were the Jewish priests and those that were holding on to the Jewish prophecies and all of that at that time. He was very angry with them. Like, his battle as part of his ministry was against the Pharisees and their teachings. And for him to already see at age 7 that what they were teaching was very limited to only the Jewish people and not expanding God's love to all people was always a big part of his message in the New Testament of the King James Bible. He was very much showing people that, or his embodiment was supposed to be good news that Jesus and God were there not just for the Jewish people, but for the Gentiles, and which was everybody outside of that. And even here he says he wants to go out and meet those other people and not be confined to just only those that he knows and those that he is familiar with, but to go out and meet the world, all those that are different. And this is very, very profound and very, very revolutionary at that time, because the Jewish people believed they were the only ones that were meant to be saved. And Jesus was like, nah, that's not what I'm here to tell you. So I love that. He always kind of knew what his purpose was, even as a child. And it all came from just being curious and asking questions and receiving his intuitive wisdom without resistance, and just being able to share that with anybody. He was telling his teacher, his rabbi, his wisdom, not just taking on what he was told by someone just because they were older or had more life experience or had more Jewish education. It didn't matter. He still stuck with what he knew. So I love that. I'm going to move on to chapter 18. I'm just going to drink some water and let you take in what. Feel free to share anything that you learned so far or anything that may have resonated for you. I know sometimes it can be hard to take in this story if you haven't read the Bible before, but at the same time, like, the messages are still there and he's still sharing like his ministry, and that's what's really important, is that his message always comes back to like love and what love is and what it can take us into and drive us out of. So I really, really um, love his ministry. Okay, so chapter 18. Jesus at a feast in Jerusalem is grieved by the cruelties of the sacrificers, appeals to Hillel, who sympathizes with him. He remains in the temple a year. Oh, before we move on. I love that too because I went on a mini rant last night about the conflicts happening overseas and how it all ties together. Yes, sure does. It sure does. And we know that unfortunately this has been a generational war. And these are just the results of what we've already seen um, after generations of just religious belief and having the superiority type of idea of who a group of people are over other people, when in reality, God's source is always going to say that I am here for all people because I created all people. So for us to always continuously separate ourselves is so of man. It has nothing to do with source. But yeah, it does have everything to do with. That's why I go back to the Bible all the time, because people don't believe that religion and politics are like coexisting, but they are. Love is the only solution to our spiritual dilemma, and everything starts in the spiritual, yes, and then leads into the physical. So if we know that these wars that are happening physically stem from a spiritual foundation, then going back to these stories and things like that can really help us collectively change that trajectory, as opposed to those that live by olden beliefs and are still causing wars and disharmony due to those beliefs, you know? So that's why we're here. That's why we're here to change those perspectives. And that's why Jesus came to share that love was what would conquer all of those things. So yeah, thank you for sharing. We're going to move on to the next chapter, chapter 18. I'll reread the summary. Jesus at a feast in Jerusalem is grieved by the cruelties of the sacrificers, appeals to Hillel, who sympathizes with him. He remains in the temple for a year. The great feast of the Jews was on, and Joseph, Mary, and their son, and many of their kin went to Jerusalem. The child was 10 years old. And Jesus watched the butchers kill the lambs and birds and burn them on the altar in the name of God. His tender heart was shocked at this display of cruelty. He asked the serving priests, "What is the purpose of this slaughter of the beasts and birds? Why do you burn their flesh before the Lord?" The priest replied, "This is our sacrifice for sin. God has commanded us to do these things and said that in these sacrifices all our sins are blotted out." And Jesus said, "Will you be kind enough to tell God proclaimed that sins are blotted out by sacrifice of any kind? Did not David say that God requires not a sacrifice for sin, that it is a sin itself to bring before his face burnt offerings as offerings for sin? Did not Isaiah say the same?" The priest replied, "My child, you are beside yourself. Do you know more about the laws of God than all the priests of Israel? This is no place for boys to show their wit." But Jesus heeded not his taunts. He went to Hillel, chief of the Sanhedrin, and he said to him, "Rabboni, I would like to talk with you. I am disturbed about this service of the Paschal feast. I thought the temple was the house of God where love and kindness dwell. Do you not hear the bleating of those lambs, the pleading of those doves that men are killing over there? Do you not smell that awful stench that comes from burning flesh? Can man be kind and just and still be filled with cruelty? A God that takes delight in sacrifice, in blood and burning flesh is not my Father God. I want to find a God of love. And you, my master, you are wise, and surely you can tell me where to find the God of love." But Hillel could not give an answer to the child. His heart was stirred with sympathy. He called the child to him. He laid his hand upon his head and wept. He said, "There is a God of love, and you shall come with me. And hand in hand we will go forth and find the God of love." And Jesus said, "Why need we go? I thought that God was everywhere. Can we not purify our hearts and drive out cruelty and every wicked thought and make within a temple where the God of love can dwell? The master of the great Sanhedrin felt as though he was himself the child, and that before him stood Rabboni, master of the higher law. He said within himself, "This child is surely a prophet sent from God." Then Hillel sought the parents of the child and asked that Jesus might abide with them and learn the precepts of the law and all the lessons of the temple priests. His parents gave consent, and Jesus did abide within the holy temple in Jerusalem, and Hillel taught him every day. And every day, the master learned from Jesus many lessons of the higher life. The child remained with Hillel in the temple for a year and then returned unto his home in Nazareth, and there he wrought with Joseph as a carpenter. Chapter 18. Yeah, so Jesus was like, yo, I love this chapter as a vegan. And I'm always going to share my vegan perspective, because the whole point of like why I personally became vegan was not just because of like health or just because of like the environment or like the killing of the animals only. It wasn't just like surface level to that point, but it did come down to like energy that we're consuming and how we're living in this life and how we've been what's the word, like desensitized to the killing of other living beings. And here in this chapter, Jesus is like, he's 10 and he's distraught and he's like, why is this even happening? Why were we told that God wants these sacrifices when prophets came during the Old Testament times and told us that this is not what we're supposed to be doing, and yet we're still doing these things, still living according to these traditions? And he didn't understand how you could correlate killing when they were also already given the 10 Commandments, and you correlate killing and cruelty to living in harmony and love. That didn't make any sense. And that, I agree, I don't understand that either, and how we live in a world where we want to live in harmony and we preach equality and things like that, and we treat animals and we treat each other in ways that are cruel and not loving. So the fact that he had this revelation and shared it with the rabbi led to him being able to be in the temple for a year and learn from the rabbi in Jerusalem. And that's part of why he also was so educated in religion at the time. Like, his ministry was backed by all of these years of study under these master rabbis and master priests. And so he knew what he was talking about. He wasn't just talking. He wasn't just young and 10 and just like, oh, just this is how I feel. No, he was already practiced. He already knew by heart the words of Solomon, the Psalms of David, and he was preaching back to the rabbi, who even said himself, I'm learning from you as a child. So I love that as well. If you received anything from that chapter, please share in the comments. I will be moving forward so that we can get through these next 2 chapters. And I'll be respectful of your time. We're already at 23 minutes. Okay, great. Okay. Okay. Chapter 19. Jesus at the age of 12 in the temple. Disputes with the doctors of the law. Reads from a book of prophecy. By request of Hillel, he interprets the prophecies. Again, the great feast in Jerusalem was on, and Joseph, Mary, and their son were there. The child was 12 years old. And there were Jews and proselytes from many countries in Jerusalem. And Jesus sat among the priests and doctors in the temple hall. And Jesus opened up a book of prophecy and read, Woe, woe to Ariel, the town where David dwelt. I will dismantle Ariel, and she shall groan and weep. And I will camp against her round about with hostile posts. And I will bring her low, and she shall speak out of the earth. With muffled voice, like a familiar spirit, shall she speak. She shall only whisper forth her speech. And foes unnumbered, like the grains of dust, shall come upon her suddenly. The Lord of hosts will visit her with thunder and with tempest and with storm, with earthquake and with devouring flames. Lo, all these people have deserted me. They draw to me with speech, and with their lips they honor me. Their hearts are far removed from me. Their fear for me is that inspired by man. And I will breathe upon my people Israel. The wisdom of their wise men shall be lost. The understanding of their prudent men shall not be found. My people seek to hide their counsel from the Lord, so that their works may not be seen. They fain would cover up their works with darkness of the night and say, who sees us now? Who knows us now? Poor foolish men, shall that which has been made say of its maker, he is not, I made myself? Or shall the pot speak out and say to him who made the pot, you have no skill, you do not know? But this will not forever be. The time will come when Lebanon will be a fruitful field, and fruitful fields will be transformed to groves. And on that day the deaf will hear the words of God. The blind will read the book of God's remembrance. And suffering ones will be relieved, and they will have abundant joy, and everyone that needs will be supplied, and it will come to pass that all the foolish will be wise. The people will return and sanctify the Holy One, and in their heart of hearts, lo, they will reverence him. When Jesus had thus read, he put aside the book and said, you masters of the law, will you make plain for us the prophet's words? Now Hillel sat among the masters of the law, and he stood forth and said, perhaps our young Rabboni who has read the word will be interpreter. And Jesus said, the area of the prophet is our own Jerusalem. By selfishness and cruelty, this people has become a stench unto the Elohim. The prophet saw these days from far, and of these times he wrote, our doctors, lawyers, priests, and scribes oppress the poor, while they themselves in luxury live. The sacrifices and the offerings of Israel are but abomination unto God. They only sacrifice that God requires is self. Because of this injustice and this cruelty of man to man, the Holy One has spoken of this commonwealth. Lo, I will overturn. Yes, I will overturn. It shall be overturned, and it shall be no more until he comes whose right it is, and I will give it unto him. In all the world there is one law of right, and he who breaks the law will suffer grief, for God is just. And Israel has gone far astray, has not regarded justice, nor the rights of man, and God demands that Israel shall reform and turn again the ways of holiness. And if our people will not hear the voice of God, lo, nations from afar will come and sack Jerusalem and tear our temple down and take our people captive into foreign lands. But this will not forever be, though they be scattered far and wide and wander here and there among the nations of the earth like sheep that have no shepherd guide. The time will come when God will bring again the captive hosts, for Israel shall return and dwell in peace. And after many years, our temple shall be built again, and one whom God will honor, one in whom the pure in heart delights, will come and glorify the house of God and reign in righteousness. When Jesus had thus said, he stepped aside, and all the people were amazed and said, this surely is the Christ. Chapter 19. Whew, that one was a lot to read. I will say I definitely began a little confused, but it's because Jesus was there to interpret. Pretty much sharing problems that we have even today. This is supposed to be happening during Jesus' time. He was 10, and this is like supposedly thousands of years ago. And he is even saying that those in high status, the doctors, the lawyers, the priests, they're all oppressing those that they are supposed to be serving and living in luxury due to that oppression. We know that's still true, and to an extent, And a lot of that is being dismantled now by us showing the truth and learning the truth. And also with us collectively and individually striving more towards love, that is helping us dismantle and overturn these cruel leaders and cruel systems and ways. And he prophesies that, it'll be overturned and one will rule and Jerusalem will be rebuilt. And at that time, he was fulfilling prophecy. He was the one to help rebuild. And I think that's why he really loved those Jewish texts as well, is because he knew intuitively that he was going to be the one to make these changes and to show a different way of living so that God can return Israel to a place of peace. So yeah, that's great. The rabbi telling him, I'm not going to interpret this. I'm going to let Christ interpret this. Y'all already knew. Okay, we're going to go on to the last chapter, and then we're going to stop there for today. Okay. Chapter 20, after the feast, the homeward journey, the missing Jesus, the search for him. His parents find him in the temple. He goes with them to Nazareth, symbolic meaning of carpenter's tools. The great feast of the Pasch was ended, and the Nazarenes were journeying toward their homes. And they were in Samaria. And Mary said, "Where is my son?" No one had seen the boy. And Joseph sought among their kindred who were on their way to Galilee, but they had seen him not. Then Joseph, Mary, and a son of Zebedee returned and sought through all Jerusalem, but they could not find him. And then they went up to the temple courts and asked the guards, "Have you seen Jesus, a fair-haired boy with deep blue eyes, 12 years of age, about these courts?" The guards replied, "Yes, he is in the temple now, disputing with the doctors of the law." And they went in and found him as the guards had said. And Mary said, "Why, Jesus, why do you treat your parents thus? Lo, we have sought 2 days for you. We feared that some great harm had overtaken you." And Jesus said, "Do you not know that I must be about my Father's work?" But he went round and pressed the hand of every doctor of the law and said, "I trust that we may meet again." And then he went forth with his parents on their way to Nazareth. And when they reached their home, he wrought with Joseph as a carpenter. One day, as he was bringing forth the tools for work, he said, "These tools remind me of the ones we handle in the workshop of the mind, where things are made of thought and where we build up character. We use the square to measure all our lines, to straighten out the crooked places of the way, and make the corners of our conduct square. We use the compass to draw circles round our passions and desires, to keep them in the bounds of righteousness. We use the axe to cut away the knotty, useless, and ungainly parts and make the character symmetrical. We use the hammer to drive home the truth and pound it in until it is a part of every part. We use the plane to smooth the rough, uneven surfaces of joint and block and board that go to build the temple for the truth. The chisel, line, the plummet, and the saw all have their uses in the workshop of the mind. And then this ladder with its trinity of steps, faith, hope, and love. On it we climb up to the dome of purity and life. And on the 12-step ladder we ascend until we reach the pinnacle of that which life is spent to build the temple of perfected man. Chapter 20. Yep, definitely don't need to add on to that. So that was section 5. And it was talking about Jesus's childhood. And I like how they ended it pretty much with where in the New Testament we do see that story of, Mary losing him. And then in the New Testament, it cuts off and we go straight into his ministry at 33. But here we are. And we'll be moving on to the works of Jesus in India next week, where he will probably learn a lot more profound lessons. But yeah, I am finished reading for today. But if you received anything from this reading, please share it in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you need to go back and listen to some of the rest, as always, the book is in the description box for you to read for yourself. But yeah, pretty much the gist of the lesson that I received today from this is that Jesus learned a lot. He lived life just like we did. He went through his childhood being educated and taking his time to learn, and he still respected his parents. He still listened to them, but he also did not stray from his purpose, and he was always learning, always trying to expand his mind, and then sharing what was revealed to him through his own lessons. And I think that's a great example that we can take here today too. Whatever it is that we're learning in our lives, through whatever stories, experiences, source, God is always giving you answers. And God is everywhere, and God is present, and thus truth is everywhere, and you have access to truth. And if you want to find it, you will find it. You just have to ask, and you just have to seek. And I definitely appreciate this story for that. And I definitely encourage you to pray about this, whatever is on your heart for this. And if you do feel called to share, then I would love to hear your perspective. Thank you for being here. Thank you. And I hope you have a beautiful rest of your Sunday. Peace.